Hello, AP Psychology students. Today we're going to wrap up our study of personality by looking at the final two theories of personality, social cognitive and humanistic. The first two we looked at were psychodynamic, which was started by Freud, and trait or type theory, which you should have looked at yesterday. As we look towards social cognitive and humanistic theory in personality, ask yourself the following. Do you shape your environment, or does your environment shape you? Are you somebody that feels like you have a big impact on your environment, or do you feel like you're somebody who is constantly being pushed around by your environment and then you don't really have much control of your environment? Do you feel in control of your own destiny? Now, it's hard as a high school student because we do have a lot of things that we can't do when we're teenagers. But as you become an adult and as you move towards your future, do you feel that you really can set out on your own path? How good do you feel about yourself? This is something that psychologists are concerned about, of course, our self-esteem. And how well do you know yourself? That's something, that it takes a really, really long time to figure out. It's not like we would even expect to know ourselves at the stage of life that you're in. And even at my age, there are times where I ask, who am I? And have I changed? And what parts of me have stayed the same? How well you're proceeding toward achieving your goals. This is a really important question at every stage of life, but at your stage of life, I'm sure you have some goals. And do you feel empowered to start towards achieving those goals? So the social cognitive personality theory is a really important theory to add on to what we've already talked about, the psychodynamic and the trait theory. I asked my students what was a drawback of the trait theory, and the biggest drawback about trait theory is that it doesn't describe how your life situations or any particular situation you might be in might impact the expression of your personality. Most of my students, if I asked them, do you think I'm talkative or quiet, would say, well, you're talkative because I talk in class a lot. But in social situations, I'm actually quite quiet. So this is described by Albert Bandura. You may recall that he was the guy that did the Bobo doll experiment, who was interested in observational learning. He described the system of reciprocal determinism in this way. That our personality is expressed through the interaction of both internal and external forces. So if you think about, let's say, taking a class, maybe this class, and you go in with this idea, I'm really excited about this class, and I'm so excited to learn, and so this is going to impact your behavior. So in your behavior, you're going to participate, you're going to pay attention, you're not going to be on your phone, you're not going to be distracted. As you behave in that interested way, you're going to impact the environment around you. And so the person sitting next to you who maybe has a neutral cognition about the class, they're going to start thinking, well, this is pretty interesting. I think I like this. And then over here, they start behaving in a way that shows that they're interested. And then in effect, they also impact the environment. The same thing can happen. Any teacher can tell you the same thing can happen with particularly disruptive students in a class. They might have behavior that is so disruptive that it affects the environment and makes it difficult to learn. So this is a really important theory in showing how we are both the products and the architects of our environment. And it can be different depending on the environment you're in. So, for example, at home, you might feel less social power than you do at school, or vice versa. And this is going to show, this theory shows how that expression of your personality, even though your core traits might be the same, your openness, your conscientiousness, etc., the way that it looks might be different depending on the situation that you're in. So see if you can come up with an example of your own about a situation where you might act differently than you do in another situation. Now, a really important part of the social cognitive theory is the concept of locus of control described by Julian Rotter. You might recall that we talked about locus of control and read about Julian Rotter's research and locus of control's relationship to physical health early in the semester. I think this puppet A string puppet is a good example of what an external locus of control would look like. Other people are in control of your lives. They're pulling the strings of your life. So locus of control merely refers to the degree to which people expect events to be controlled by their internal efforts or by external forces. So if you feel that you are in control of your own efforts and your own life, then you have an internal locus of control. If you do not feel like you have control, if you feel like you are being pulled by other people constantly, this would be an external locus of control. A term here that has come up on the AP exam in the past that is not in your textbook is self-efficacy. Now, when you think about language and terms that you maybe haven't heard before, do try to think about how these terms sound. So self-efficacy sounds like self-efficiency. When my students had this on the free response portion of a test some years ago, that's what they did, is they thought of the term efficiency, efficacy, efficiency. How well can I advocate for myself? How efficient am I for advocating for myself? And that, of course, is going to be part of an internal locus of control. So when you think of locus of control, think of it as a continuum with external locus of control on one end and internal locus of control on the other. And all of us fall somewhere in between. And I'd like to also mention that this can be situational. For me, I have a really high internal locus of control when I'm at work. I am the teacher in my classroom. I can decide how I want to teach something. So I have a very fairly internal locus of control at work. So people with an internal locus of control, they have a belief about themselves that they can control their destiny and influence their environment. This is a really important belief that they have, and it leads to psychological health. If we have an internal locus of control, we take responsibility for our own achievement. Likewise, we take responsibility for our failures. So, for example, if we're not prepared for a test and we do poorly on the test, we will admit it was because of our own lack of preparedness. It wasn't because of something the teacher did or a badly written test. There are numerous health benefits to having an internal locus of control. People with an internal locus of control are more likely to have regular physicals, go to the dentist, brush their teeth, exercise, and all of these are because they believe that it matters. When you have an external locus of control, you don't believe that those efforts will matter in the long run. What fosters an internal locus of control? A couple of important things, and I'm going to repeat this later on when we look at development. A warm family environment and consistent parenting allow a child to develop an internal locus of control. If you have consistent parents, you know what to expect each day from them when they get home from work, when you get home from school. This will develop in you a sense of security and a sense of control, internal locus of control. Now let's take a look at external locus of control. The picture I have on the top is from a study that you're going to read in conjunction with this lesson. And it was a famous study using dogs by Martin Seligman. I'm not going to go into the study right now because you're going to read about it. It's linked on your assignment for today. And I have some questions that I'd like you to answer about that. But let's talk about external locus of control. If you have an external locus of control, you believe that your failure or your success are merely due to chance. People with an external locus of control are generally people with limited social power. Now, children will have limited social power, and as a teen, you might even feel some limited social power. But people in particular who have limited social power are people who are in a lower socioeconomic status. Having worked with people who are very low income in the past, it is it is really abundantly clear how many barriers they have had to face in trying to get employment, in trying to get a phone, and trying to get transportation. And after a while, they just begin to lose hope. Abuse victims, of course, have an external locus of control. The thing about abuse is it is so insidious, and it is physical, it's verbal, it's emotional, it's psychological. And someone who is abused never knows what to expect from their abuser. Oftentimes, we blame a victim of abuse for not getting out of the situation that they're in. I've seen this many times in my life where people have said, well, why didn't that person just leave the relationship? I knew a teen who was in a very abusive relationship, and her boyfriend was amazingly abusive to her. And yet, even after assault, she went back to him because of learned helplessness. So, learned helplessness occurs when you have a series of uncontrollable events. This leads to what's called a perceived or a real lack of control. In some cases, if you're a prisoner of war, or you're in a situation where you literally can't get out of, then you do have a real lack of control. If a number of uncontrollable events occur in your life, such as illness, cancer, death of a loved one, loss of a job, etc. These can all lead to learned helplessness, and this leads to a sense of generalized helplessness. The picture I have here, I know part of it is obstructed, but this individual feels chained to the ground, even though there is a small fence to get over. And the thing is, it's not really a small fence. In order to get out of learned helplessness, it feels really, really real. And so instead of judging people who have learned helplessness and who are depressed as a result of it, by the way, learned helplessness is highly correlated with depression, and it's believed leads to depression, which is what the article is about that you're going to be reading, then the best thing to do is not to judge them, but to help empower them. And for yourself, if you believe that you are in a state of learned helplessness, it is best not to judge yourself, but to take control over what you can take control of. I'd like to just make a comment about this in reference to the situation we're currently in. We are in a pandemic. There's nothing that we can do about having a pandemic in our world right now. It can lead us to feeling like we have an external locus of control. Our governor has called off school for the rest of the school year. Some of the activities that we look forward to, especially in our senior year, have been canceled. We can control that, and that can lead some people to feeling depressed. But I want to encourage you that you can take control of what you can take control of. You maybe don't like distance learning, but you can still make the most of it. You can take a walk outside. You can find ways to take control of what you can control, and that hopefully will help you to not feel as helpless as you may feel at this time in history. I'm going to continue on the next video with humanistic theory. Thank you for your attention.